Welcome to the foundation portion of the Chief Architect Bachelor View project. In this video, I'll cover the two different options for furred walls, creating a mixed foundation height with both a living area and crawl space, how to step a foundation wall, creating both a foundation and a floor plan when the two items are located on the same floor. Let's begin by taking a look at the two different types of furred walls you can use when you have a foundation with a living space. When you have a living space and you're using a furred wall, which might consist of a concrete wall and then a stick-framed wall, there's two approaches you can use. The first one is to use a single wall. And when you draw your floor plan out, using a single wall is just faster. And if your goal is to only create a floor or foundation with a single wall, this is the easiest way to do it. If I open up this single wall and take a look at the properties of it, let's go ahead and click the Define button. And I've created this furred wall, and it consists of the main layer, which is 8 inches of concrete. I have an air gap of 1 inch. In this case, I'm using a 2x4 wall, and then on the inside a 1/2 inch of sheetrock. And when you take a 3D view of it, the inside for the living space really looks no different than using two different wall types. Let's take a look at the other approach that you can use for creating furred walls, which is really using two separate walls. And when you use two separate walls, it's going to take you more time because it's twice the amount of work. If you have a foundation, you can create it automatically and follow the floor above, and then you can draw your interior wall using the stick-framed wall inside of that. And let's go ahead and take a look at the two different walls in here. What I've got on the top wall is just simply a 8-inch concrete wall. There's only one layer to it. And on the second wall, it's a 2x4 wall. And the only difference, if we go into the define wall types, is I've got a 1-inch air gap on the other side of it. It makes it easy to bump. So when you zoom in, you can see that the larger air gap will bump to the concrete wall, and then I don't have to worry about being exact about it. So it does make it a much easier process to do that. The other setting when you use two separate walls is to make sure on the structure panel that it's marked as a furred wall, since you will have a little bit of a gap between the concrete and the other wall. Sometimes you can get little connected rooms or invisible walls. This furred wall will help maintain that structure and eliminate those extra items in there. Of course, when you make changes to your plan, it will take longer using two walls. So again, I typically will only create the foundation when I feel really good about the upper floor. It's not that you can't make changes, it just will take longer. Here's probably the biggest bullet right here, is you can do both a foundation and a floor plan when those two items exist on the same floor. If you take a look at this plan that we're going to be working on, here's the foundation plan. It's on floor 0. And then as I shift over and we look at the floor plan, it's also on floor 0. It's the living space. So you can see that I was able to create both of these views on the same floor. And really the thing that makes that happen is by using two different wall types. Framing can be more flexible. Your materials list can be more accurate, and the control for displaying layers, you have more flexibility in this. As we just looked at the floor plan and the foundation, you can turn on and off different layers. Use this plan view to control that, and you can just get a more accurate view. For this project, I am going to use the approach of using two separate walls, and you can see how I'll do that. Let's go into the program and build our foundation. The Bachelor View plan is open to the previous video where we built the roof. First thing I want to do is change my Save Plan View to the Floor Plan Shell View. Over in this area right here, I want to define this as a garage room, and I'm going to do that before I build the foundation, because the program will automatically see the room type as foundation and put a slab and adjust the room height accordingly. Let's go ahead and use our interior wall tool. Come over here, snap on the corner, and just draw an interior wall. I will go ahead and open that up, and I'm going to change the wall type to an interior 6 wall. And then in the room, I'll double click to open it, and I'm going to just change the room type to a garage. Now to build the foundation, let's go up into the Build menu. Let's come down to Floor, Build Foundation. In the foundation type area, one of the things that I'm doing for this particular foundation is I'm going to hang the floor platform. My floor platform is set up to be 14 inches. You'll find that setting in the room section of the dialog. That was in my default. If you were to open up that room where my cursor is, you would see that that is a 14-inch floor joist, and when we hang the floor platform it will go down that amount. Slab thickness, which will be at the bottom of the floor. The type of wall, if you are going to use the single approach or the double wall approach, you could come in here and edit the different default. Mine is an 8-inch concrete. And then the height of the stem wall is set to 139 1/8, including the sill plate. Right below that you'll see what the calculation is for the basement ceiling. In this case it is also 10 feet. Underneath the garage, I'm going to set this stem wall to be at the slab level at 0 inches, and then I'm ready to build the foundation. At this point the program will ask you if you'd like to derive the foundation from the main floor. That's usually the fastest way, and I'm going to go ahead and use that method. Now that the foundation is built, I have a saved plan view specifically for the foundation. I'm going to go ahead and change it to that foundation view. You may not notice any real changes. Let's go in and open up our project browser, and underneath the foundation let's just take a look at some of the settings that I have in here. One of the things that makes it easy for me is I have it tied to a specific floor. In this case it's the foundation floor. The rest of the settings are pretty standard, and then my selected defaults will have changed. Notice that the default set is set to foundation, which controls these settings down below. You could change them individually, but anytime I do dimensions it will show up using these properties and the layers and the formatting that is associated with it, and the same is true for all of the other settings. There is a layer set associated with it, and then a CAD layer when you draw CAD. Let's go ahead and use the perspective floor overview camera and take a look. You can see in the full basement that we have the 10-foot space, and then in the garage area, let me just double click and open that up. I am going to make one adjustment. You'll notice in the diagram, if I zoom in here just a little bit, I want the ceiling height to be at the 121. So I'm going to go ahead and set the ceiling, instead of it being lowered, to be exactly at the same height as the rest of the plan, because eventually I'm going to come in here and add a wall for the pantry, powder room, and a few other rooms. What I want to do with this foundation is make a couple of crawl spaces. Let's go ahead and pull this wall all the way across, and in these back two areas I want to set these as a crawl space. You can do this in a 3D view if you tap on the room, open it up. I'll go ahead and rename this room to crawl space. And then over on the structure panel, I'm going to come down and change the stem wall height at 38 inches. Make sure that there is no ceiling over this room, no floor under this room, and that should be it for the crawl space. There's no floor in this space, so I can't actually select the room. I want to use the object eyedropper and replicate those changes we just made to this area. I'm also going to make this section a crawl space. Let's do that in our foundation view. I'm going to come over, use the object eyedropper, click in this room, apply it to that room, and then let's also make the change over in here. Use the object eyedropper, click in this room, apply that room, and in 3D you can see that we replicated those exact same changes and have set those areas to be a crawl space. Now the next change I want to make is for the garage area as well. Let's go ahead and open this up. I'm going to set the stem wall in this case to be 57.5. Now on this foundation, the back wall is going to be exposed. It's going to be a daylight basement, and that's going to be at ground level. I'm going to need to get these footings below the frost line. Before I add any interior walls, here's what I'm going to do to extend those down to be below the frost line. I'm going to click in the main room here. And in the stem walls, I'm going to go plus 24 inches. I usually press tab to see the calculation. You can see in the diagram that that has pulled this stem wall down, so I can get that below the frost line. Let's go back to the floor plan view. I want to place the dimensions before I add this furred wall that will go inside of the larger space here. And before I click and place these automatic dimensions, let's go into the defaults. I want to be able to control what layer these dimensions go on, so I reduce one of the steps involved. I'm going to open up my default settings. I'm going to come over to the dimension defaults, and for the automatic exterior dimensions, I'm going to edit that for the layer and change it from the dimensions floor plan that they currently are going to, and I'm going to change that to the dimensions foundation. So I'm just going to come down here a little bit, choose that layer, and now when I use this tool, these dimensions will be on that layer. Let's just click on the upper dimension. Notice in my very bottom status bar, the layer is showing that foundation that we applied those dimensions to. So it's one of the things I'll typically do to isolate those. Remember, if you go back to the floor plan view and use that, change the default setting. That way you can save yourself a step in moving the layers for those objects. Before I add those furred walls, I actually want to take a look at this intersection right in here. In the 3D view, you can kind of see that we have a spot right in there. I want to use the break tool, and I want to create a break right in this intersection, since this is now a crawl space and at a different elevation. I'm going to select the wall. I'm going to use the break tool. I'm going to come in here and put a break right in that area right there. And in the 3D view, you can see that we've cleaned up that intersection. To add those fur walls in our floor plan view, I'm going to set my default wall type. Let's go ahead and click on our interior wall. Double click on it to set the default wall type. At the beginning of the video, I talked about having wall types that are furred, and what I've done is I've set up a specific wall type that's a 4-inch furred wall. And just to peek at it one more time, it's got a 1-inch air gap, and then the rest of it is a standard 2x4 with a 1/2 inch of sheetrock. I'm going to go ahead and set that as my default interior wall tool. And now when I click and drag one of these walls out, the program is telling us that the normal wall layer is not on because I'm using the foundation plan view. Let's turn that on for the time being, and then we'll go back in and make the adjustments. And as I zoom in, you can see that in fact that air gap is oriented correctly. I can now just simply bump that wall up against the foundation wall, and I know that I have that particular air gap that I've set up. Let's go ahead and pull this wall over, pull it down. By the way, I don't need to be very exact about this because I will come in and bump those against the wall. I find this an easier process than trying to be exact, and then it takes a little bit more time when you're exact because then you're worried about making sure that it snaps to every side. So now I can just kind of bump these walls against the stem wall, and it's a pretty easy process to make sure that it's bumping right against the stem wall. Now in the 3D view, you can see the furred wall, and this is another advantage of using two different wall types. You see how it's stepped down from the stem wall to bear either the floor joist or the floor truss. If you used a singular furred wall that would have been composed of the concrete and then a 2x4, you're not going to see the same level of detail where it actually steps that framing wall down. This is an advantage of using the two different wall types. One of the important settings for these furred walls, let's just open it up one more time. Underneath the structure panel, these walls are marked as furred walls. That will just help ensure that no connected room walls are created, which can sometimes complicate your model for you. So those are all marked as furred walls, those interior walls that we've just drawn. Now the walls that are going to be the daylight basement walls, let's take a look at what properties we want to make a change on here. The upper portion of these walls, I want them to be stone, and then the portion that's going to be below the terrain, I want that to be concrete. In that case, let's go ahead and select each one of these walls. I'm going to hold my Shift key down, grab each of these exposed walls. Let's go ahead and open them up. On the Wall Types panel, I'll go ahead and select that they're a pony wall. You can see that we have a stem wall as the lower portion. The upper portion, let's set that as stone. On the hide off floor, let's go ahead and set that down to very near the ground level. Press the Tab key and you can see the adjustment made over here in the diagram. Since this back wall is exposed and a full daylight basement, I'm going to stack the foundation framing on top of these walls. I'm going to come over to the structure panel. I'm going to remove the setting to hang the foundation floor That way the floor platform will stack on top of those walls. When we make the change, you can see the walls lower, and then the wall type, of course, is now the stone and the stem wall setting. Now the next thing I want to do is take a look at this side wall. I want this portion to be stone, and then the terrain is going to slope down in this direction. I want to take and step this wall. So let's do a couple things. One, in this view, I'm going to click on the top of the wall. I'm going to click on the break command right in here. I'm going to open up this wall segment. We'll go in, we'll make the same type of change on the wall types. Pony wall, lower portion stem wall, upper portion. I'm going to leave this as a concrete wall with stone on it. And then on the height off floor, we'll go ahead and set that to be 0. Now for this portion right in here, let's take an elevation view, and I want to step that wall as if it's going to go down to the terrain, even though we haven't added our terrain yet. With the elevation camera, let's come down here, shoot an elevation. And then with the line tool, I'm just going to superimpose the line that's going to represent the terrain. And this is just going to be an approximate value in here. So that's going to be the slope of the terrain that goes down the side of the house. I need to take this back wall right in this area right here, pull it down, and then we're going to step this wall. Let's begin by just pulling this back wall down. I'm going to go into the 3D view. Let's rotate our camera around just a little bit. Sometimes I find it easier to do this in vector view, and I'm just going to simply pull this wall down. I'm not going to worry about being too exact in here. We'll just get it to about the top of the footing. And now back in the elevation view, let's step down the side using the break tool. When you select the wall, I'm just going to come in here and create a few different breaks. So using the break tool in my lower edit menu, I'm going to come in here and put a couple of breaks. You can also use a shortcut on your keyboard, number 3, and I'm just going to put in 3 different breaks along this wall. Let's begin on the back side, and let's pull this down to match the lower foundation wall that we just pulled down. I'm going to take this segment down here. Remember, the footing needs to be below the frost line approximately, and then we'll take this segment in here and pull this down right in that area. Now you can see that we've superimposed this terrain line over it, and then as long as we're below that frost line, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and take a look at this in our 3D view. Now you can see the stepping. On this wall in here, let's go ahead and make the same change we did to the opposing wall. Open it up, change it to a pony wall. Lower wall's concrete, upper wall is concrete with stone. And then on the bottom elevation, we're going to probably need to put in a negative number of the top wall. And the floor itself, since this wall is actually drawn on floor 1, let's go ahead and put in the floor value and see what that looks like in here. You can always adjust this in the view, but the reason I got that number is if you look at the floor value in here, the floor value is at minus 135 from the absolute 0 from the floor above, and that's how I got that value in here. Now for the wall on the side, you want concrete on the bottom, and you may want a stone veneer. If you take a look at my finished design I have up on the screen here, you want the stone veneer to follow the slope, but I'm not going to use a pony wall to do that. I'm actually just going to use a polyline solid and draw that in the elevation view. Let's go into the elevation view and just draw that. With the polyline solid, let's come down and grab the solid. We won't be too exact about this to begin with. We'll come around about in this area right here. We'll go ahead and shape it. I'll pull the bottom up to be even with the, sometimes easier to turn on your crosshairs, even with the lower portion of the stone right in this area. I'll grab the diamond, pull it up until we're about even with that or parallel with that line. Again, I'm not going to worry about being too exact in this case. Let's open it up. Let's set the thickness of it. I'm going to use the value of the stone veneer, which should be 1 9/16. I also like to control the layer. You'll find that setting on the line style. I'll come over here, click the define button. I end up sticking these on a layer that I call plant shelves for walls. I've just used that particular name. That way I can isolate the layer. And now I'll use the material eyedropper. We'll pick up the stone, we'll apply it, and then I'm going to go back over into the floor plan view. I want to make sure that that's exactly positioned on this wall. I'll need to turn that layer on. So come over to the layer display control, make sure that it's turned on. We'll zoom in take a look and see where it's positioned. It looks pretty good. Maybe you might want to pull that right out to the edge of the wall. It's adjusted as I need it to be, and then I'll just go back in and turn that layer off because I don't want it being displayed for my foundation view. The other thing that I'm going to turn off for the foundation view, I'm going to tap on that interior wall. I'm going to turn off the walls normal. And now I've got the view that I need for the foundation plan. This foundation plan can be sent to the layout. Let me go back, open up that layout plan that we've been working on. My foundation plan should be on page 8. We'll slide over to page 8. And then from the foundation view, let's go ahead and send this out to the layout. I'm going to send it out at a 1/4 inch scale to page 8. And then I'll just simply position that. I'll hold my control key down. Go back over to page 7. This is where I want to send the daylight basement plan over. Let's go back to the foundation. I'm now going to change my Save Plan view back to the floor plan. When I do that, it will turn off the foundation dimensions. It will also turn off the footings. If you want to turn off the stem walls, you could click on these walls. You could turn off the wall foundation layer, and then you'll have a very clean view for the floor plan. Let's go ahead and turn that layer back on, and then you would send this out to the layout sheet if you wanted those stem walls. Come back in, send that out at a 1/4 inch. Go ahead and position it on the page, and that's how I can create both a floor plan for the daylight basement and then the detail for the foundation plan. And if you take a look at the completed drawings, I obviously have added more detail in here for the foundation plan. You can see the information in here, and then as we move and take a look at the daylight basement, again the interior walls have been added in here, but you can get a very specific look for both of these different floors when they coexist on the same floor. Well, that concludes this segment of the foundation video for the Bachelor View project. In the next segment, I'm going to add some of the interior walls and use the room definitions to control and adjust the ceilings.